This is the Content Strategy Insights podcast, episode number 108. Every once in a while, someone comes up with an elegantly simple model of a complex business process. 15 years ago, Halland did this for the content strategy and information architecture professions. You can understand his core model in about 5 minutes and start applying its strategy, business, and design methods right away. But then you can also spend 15 years, as he has, discovering new ways to use this powerful tool.
Welcome to the Content Strategy Insights podcast, where accomplished content strategy experts share their wisdom with our friends in the content community. Our mission is to democratize content strategy, to make its principles and practices accessible to everyone. And now, here's your host, Larry Swanson.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 108 of the Content Strategy Insights podcast. I'm really happy today to have with us Halland. Ara is best known as the inventor of the core model, and that's why I was excited to get him on the show to talk about that. So welcome, Ara. Tell the folks a little bit more about the work you do and how you came to develop the core model.
Yeah, hi Larry, great to be on the show. I've been in the business for a quarter of a century, I found out the other day. I've been calling myself an information architect since 1999, I think. And I've been a consultant mostly, but also some in-house. But I work with, right now, I'm a freelance or working for myself with my wife, actually. And we do facilitation courses, speaking engagement, and so on. And within strategy and behavioral psychology and content strategy and whatever.
Yeah.
User experience. Yeah.
I love that you have like a behavioral foundation to your work. Is that where the core model came, or tell us where the core model came from?
Yeah, where did it come from? It was back in 2006, actually. So it's 15 years ago, actually. So that speaks a little bit about the model being timeless in its nature. But in 2006, I've been working as a consultant for around 10 years. And I had my share of the dot-com period with all those fancy projects and huge project teams and technology, and we made portals with thousands of pages, and nobody thought about the content, and people didn't communicate. So developers, designers, stakeholders, leaders, everyone was kind of, it's kind of what they call this Biblian term of the Babel Tower. So I figure there's something we're missing. We're missing the most important thing. We're talking about things that are not that important. We need to talk about the content and the user needs and the strategic needs. And what came to mind, like I don't know, Neo in the Matrix, there is no spoon. It was just let's just flip the model around. Let's start with the most important thing. Let's start with the core, where the user finds the answer for a particular user task, and where we at the same time reach a business goal. So you can kind of pinpoint it to that unit of information. Then you know where to start, and you can discuss the real content, the real issues, the real user needs, the real strategic goals in the context where it's not too complicated.
Mm-hmm. I love the way you just said that, because you just described strategy, content strategy, that balancing of user needs and the business goals. But you also hinted at because one of the ways I've seen you talk about the core model is like that old way that you were just talking about, where nobody's talking and you end up with these infinite grid sitemap things. And you show this one. I just remember this one image where there's like 3 or 4 like core pieces of content or core tasks that users want to accomplish that you pick out. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wrote an article a few years back about the typical website, which is the story that goes again and again for 25 years, still happening. You have a website that's huge. Users can't find their answers. Customer service is bogged down. Frustration in the organization. We need a new website. So you call in a fancy agency, start with the logo, discuss the front page. Someone makes an information structure, and I found out usually it's about 2 weeks before launch. Someone remembers, we need some content. We need some content. And then you take all your brochures and you migrate the old app into the new website, and you launch, and everyone's happy. But you haven't fixed anything because the content is still unprioritized. And then a few years passes, and people can't find their way around. Customer service is bogged down. We need a website to redesign. And you start all over again. Nobody has learned anything because, so that's kind of the typical story of a redesign. And the point is that the user is only interested in one page, nothing else. So all the rest of the website is just in the way, and it bogs down the internal search, navigation. Even Google has problems. So the thing is, for this particular user, the rest of the website is just in the way. So we have to think of that page as the front page for that user. This is the contact point for the user. And if you manage to prioritize those important core pages, then you can really focus on what's the most important user tasks.
And that tool, one of the many uses of the tool is that ability to prioritize. But there's some other sort of benefits of the model that you've talked about, like not only prioritization, but also the collaboration part of it, and just the way to think about content. Can you talk a little bit about some of those high level, and I want to come back though to that model, but I'd love to talk just about the benefits. Like you just mentioned prioritization a couple of times, but is that the main benefit, or what do you see as helping people most when they adopt the model?
I think the most important thing about the model is that it's a prioritization tool, but it's also, and it's a thinking tool for kind of turning the perspective. But the third thing is that it's a tool for communication, because this is a very, very simple concept. It's 6 elements in the core model. It's the target group, the user task, the goal, the business goals, the inward paths, and the core content, and the forward paths. So, and this is kind of works like an Esperanto between different competencies and silos in the organization, because everyone can relate to those simple terms. So that's the beauty of it, is when you use it in what we call a core workshop, where you have stakeholders from all the organization. You have developers, you have designers, you have communication people, and HR and marketing, whatever, product owners, and they work together in pairs, core pairs. So, and you pair them up across silos and competency, and make them work very concrete on this core sheet, and work with the core. They work with each their core in a core pair. And then we have some exercises, and it's a fast-paced, and it's I'm not saying funny, but it's people have a good time in these workshops, and they end up with something concrete, that they can agree upon, and that which is a great foundation for developer, for making functionality, for a content strategist to point back to this is what we agreed was the prioritized call to action and important elements, and for the designers as well. So everyone can point back to a point where we all agreed on something, and then we have some common ground and we can talk together, not just in the core workshop, but also afterwards. So it's the communication tool part of it is it's a great thing, I think.
That's one of the things I love about it, is that it's this really useful artifact to gather around and work together on. And so you've mentioned, I think at this point, you've mentioned, I think, all of the components of the model, but can you walk through it? Just sort of, this is kind of weird doing it on a podcast because it's such a visual tool. But if you could make your best attempt at like an audio explanation of the model.
Yeah, so it's 6 elements, and by the way, people are used to this black and white sheet with. If they've been using it, they'll be using the black and white model, but it's redesigned in when we did this book. We also reconceptualized the entire core model, so each element now has a distinct color and a distinct shape, so that you can work with them separately, and you can also think more modular and build a customer journey from core to core and so on, and it also works digitally and hybrid as well. But to take the 6 elements, the first one is the target group, where you try to pinpoint who are the actual user, and preferably with a name and characteristics, personas, empathy mapping. You can combine the core model with more or less every other tool that you're using, but describe the user, get a feeling for who they are. That's the first part. The second part is the user task. What are the users coming to the website or your digital service or your app or whatever? What are their tasks? And this is actually the top task perspective from Jerry McGovern. He's been evangelizing this perspective for years. He also wrote the foreword to the book as well, so he's a fan. But that's the kind of the single most important thing that you can use to prioritize the content. So if you have documented user tasks from being search log, web stats, customer service statistics, or top task analysis, then that's the kind of the prioritization tool that you use. The point is you have to answer the major user tasks. That's the deal. So that's target group, user tasks, and then you have what we call goals for the solution. We used to call it business goals, but you also have some public organizations and others. So what we're talking about, use the term micro strategy, actually, because you want to take the abstract overall strategy and take it down to earth and relate strategic goals to this particular web page or whatever it is you're working on. So if you take the overall strategy and apply it to this single contact point, what are the measurable goals that we can use for this particular instance? And that gives an entirely different perspective on strategy as well. So that's okay. Let's see, target groups, user tasks, goals, and then you have that's the kind of the top floor. of the model, and the bottom floor is actually it's a customer journey through a contact point. So you have the inward paths, which is how users will find your core content, and that's of course search engine optimization, it's marketing, it's inbound, it's information architecture, it's all the tools that you kind of use to bring traffic to the solution. So that's getting users mainly. And it also has some tools where we think in scenarios. Okay, where are the user? How are they thinking? What is their mental and physical context? And you use that to create good inward paths to a core. And then usually we skip the core content and we go to the forward paths. That's the behavioral psychology part of it, which is okay, where do you want to lead the customer or the user next? Because you have business goals, right? You want to sell a product or download a newsletter or change behavior or whatever. You have to think like a behavioral designer and think, what are you actually trying to achieve? And what does that mean in order to, how do you need to prioritize your calls to action so that you actually, the user behavior is the way you want it. So that's also, so when you have all these 5 elements, target group, user tasks, goals, inward paths, forward paths, then you come to the core content. Now you have a kind of like a dashboard where you can pick the user tasks and the calls to action and the search words and so on. And then you try to make the simplest and most prioritized and the optimal solution for this particular scenario. And that makes people think in an entirely different way about content, because now you have all this context and then you can prioritize within that context. So that's basically
yeah, I've got to say, I love that. And you did a great, I was a little nervous when I asked that question. I think, can you even describe this? And you did a brilliant job. So thanks so much for that. But I also see, like, I can't remember when I first found the tool, but it's kind of like been embedded in my work for a long time. But the way you just talked about it, I'm seeing all kinds of other possibilities and other more power to it. Like pretty much anything in a digital organization has a touch point with this model, like marketing and content and strategy and user experience design and all that. Can you talk about, and you've mentioned already, like the paired technique that you use in the workshops and things like that, but tell me a little bit more about how this, because I think we all want to break silos, and this seems like a really good tool for that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Breaking down silos, yes. Yeah, like you say, it's kind of represents the different parts of the organization. So marketing, that's the inward paths. Of course, sales, that's the forward paths. Strategy, that's kind of strategy people, and the user tasks is user experience, and then it all comes together in content design, really. So everyone has perspective to content design, and yeah, and the thing you said, it's a power tool, because the beauty is that it's so simple, almost banal, that you can understand it in 5 minutes, but then you can work like me for 15 years and still find new twists to it. Oh wow, it's behavioral psychology as well. I didn't know that until my wife, who's a behavioral psychologist and also the co-author of the book. Actually, it's not just me; it's me and my wife. So it's new aspects all the time. And just to mention that one more aspect that's getting more and more relevant these days is content modeling, and using this core model approach to define a content model. Because content modeling is also a cross-competency exercise. So it works really well for describing the content model, how elements relate, and so on. And I had a talk the other day with Carrie Hayne, the author of
Designing Connected Content. Yeah.
Designing Connected Content. And she's using the core model as well as a foundation for working with content models. So that's a really interesting area to learn more about.
Well, and again, that kind of points back to the power of the tool, because I'm thinking both of that it's like, if you just diagram the model a little bit differently, it'd look a lot like an entity relationship diagram or a domain model. You could model it that way. Another thing that occurs to me though is, as you're talking, like, I know this came out of websites, but this model, I use it, but so I know at least one person is using it, like as in product design or in product content design. But also, like, I'm thinking of like technical content, like technical support content and documentation and things like that. And just, marketing is an obvious place, and website content. Do you have a feel, is the model, are people adopting the model outside of web projects?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, been using it for other kind of channels than websites. So if you're writing a Facebook post or a content marketing article, then it's great to use the core model. We also been using it for designing apps. So when you're designing a screen for an app, then that's a core. How do people get there and what should happen? And really, if you think in terms of service design and customer journeys, any kind of contact point in a customer journey is the core. So it could be a letter from a public instance, or it could be a notification or whatever. So
yeah, as you talk about that, I'm thinking all of a sudden of the evolution of customer journey mapping. And I gotta say, it didn't occur to me till like a month ago that, like, oh, Ara has described this already, like with the inward path, the task. I'm like, duh, you just stitch it together and it becomes a journey. But then, and that kind of gets in this whole, and the way you just described that, like you were almost talking about like it seems like a really good tool for implementing an omnichannel strategy, that like our customer might be looking at a kiosk in a store, or getting a letter from the sales department, or reading the website. Is that how it's being used as well? Sounds like.
Yeah, it's an omni-channel tool, absolutely. So and all the inwards paths obviously point from different channels, and the forward paths is typically logging into an application, and then the application screen is a core as well. And when you say the last two projects, or the two projects I'm working on now, are actually startups who have products, and we're making this conversion journey somehow from whatever context the different users have. How do we get them to the site, and how do we make them convert and starting to use the platform? So it's a customer journey from the Google search to the logged in page, and also follow-up emails. So you can map the entire customer journey with different cores and forward paths to the next core, etc. And also,
I'd love to dig in a little more into the core, because that's sort of like, it's literally the core, the central piece of this model. And just a little bit about how because you talked about like Jerry McGovern's top tasks and the empathy mapping and journey mapping and things and tools like that. But how granular does it get? Are we talking about one specific interaction or one web page? Like most of all the examples you've given are like that. But tell me, I guess, can you define model, the term, and how you're using it here?
I used to say it was the optimal information unit that solves the user task and a business goal. It reaches a business goal. But in the book, thinking it's the most important contact points between the business and the user. Those are the cores. But it could be anything. It could be a page. It could be a module within the page. It could be a web post. It could be a flow. So like checkout flow. So it's kind of it's loose. Yeah, there's no correct answer until you use the model and find out. And that's also an important part. You shouldn't define what the core actually is before you have defined the framework, and then you see what it is. We had an example of that a few years ago when Norway's biggest telecom company, and they sent out what's the name? The bill, the receipt, the
invoice.
Invoice.
Yeah.
So we're going to make a website that explained the invoices because people couldn't understand it. And when we started that using the core model, it became obvious, of course, the problem is the invoice, not the website. People don't want to go to the website to have the invoice explained. So the core was actually the invoice itself. So then the project kind of changed into redesigning the actual invoice. So that's one example of you shouldn't be too what's the question? You should be open to that the answer is something else than what you thought.
Well, and I love that example too, because you used earlier in the conversation, you talked about the model being just sort of banal, this ordinary, normal thing. And I'm like, dude, you're disrespecting your work. But the way you just described that, it's like, no, this is like, sometimes it's a little banal, little artifact like an invoice. That's the most important thing to the customer. And really giving some core attention to that is going to improve the customer experience. So that's, yeah, I love that. Hey, all right, I can't believe it. We're already coming up close to time, but I want to make sure, that you get the last word. Is there anything that has come up in the conversation or that's just on your mind that you want to, actually, and one thing I want to make sure we talk about too is tell us a little bit more about your book. We gotta, because I'm excited to see this.
Yeah. So the book, I've been thinking about the book for 15 years, and I've written the book maybe 7 times, and I've been thinking too much about this. So, and the kind of the thing that made this actually happen was when I got my wife on board, and she could help me really crystallize things. So the book is coming hot off the presses on Monday, actually, the Norwegian book. So it's exciting to see how people receive it. And the plan is to have it translated and make an English version of it sometime early next year, February, March, hopefully. And also, Confab. I'll be speaking. I'm hosting a core workshop on Confab. That's in April, is it? I think
usually in April or May. I don't know the dates next year, but I'm excited. I'll go just for that.
So come to Confab, have a chat, and I'll sell you my book and talk about the core model.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Ara. Hey, oh, and one last thing. What's the best way for people to stay in touch? Do you have a social media account or other place you like to connect with folks?
Yeah, I have an English account on Twitter, which is Core Model Book. That's the name of the account. And then also have a website explaining the core model, and you can find that at thecoremodel.com. So that's for now it's a Medium blog, but I'm making a website that's more in line with the new concept and design for the core model. So the thinking is that this should be a universe with the book and the website with power class and core pages and everything.
Nice. Well, thanks so much, Roy. Great conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening. If you can think of a friend who might enjoy this episode, please share it with them. And please join us again for our next content strategy interview.